If you have ever stood in the middle of your child's meltdown and felt like a complete failure as a parent, this episode is for you. Not because you failed, because nobody ever gave you the right framework. Until today. I have worked with hundreds of families to help them change the dynamics within their family system. They come to me filled with sadness, confusion, and immense frustration. I have them reframe this one question. It is the moment a parent stops asking, "What is wrong with my child?" and starts asking, "What is happening in my child's nervous system right now? And what does it need from me?" That one question asked in the middle of the hardest moment of your parenting week changes the entire outcome. Download the Meltdown map, and I will show you exactly how. It worked with our own neurodivergent son with ADHD. And each time we moved away from this blueprint, friction ultimately edged its way back into our lives. If you are desperate for peace, want to understand your child better, want to change the channel in your family dynamics, you are at the right place. If you know someone who could benefit from this episode and the toolkit, which can be found in my show notes, please share this episode with them. I have worked with hundreds of families to help them change the dynamics within their home. They come to me filled with sadness, confusion, and immense frustration. They have tried everything. They are exhausted from trying. And almost every single one of them is asking the same question in 1,000 different ways. What is wrong with my child? I know this because I lived it. Our own son is neurodivergent with ADHD, and every time my husband and I moved away from this framework, friction edged its way back into our home. Not because we stopped loving him, because we stopped asking the right question. This blueprint is not just clinical, it is personal, and it works. Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. I am Stephanie Buckley, parenting strategist, ADHD specialist, and family systems coach. I have been married for over 3 decades, and I am a mom to a now thriving 23-year-old son. This podcast was created because I wanted parents to have access to the kind of insight and tools that actually create change inside the home. Because what I see every day is not a lack of effort from parents, but a mismatch between what children are being asked to do and what their environment has prepared them to handle. And when that mismatch grows, it does not just impact behavior. It impacts identity, motivation, emotional regulation, and the overall functioning of the entire family system. Today, I want to talk about something that sits at the very center of that mismatch for so many of the families I work with. I want to talk about meltdowns, not tantrums, meltdowns. Because these two things look almost identical from the outside, and they require completely different responses. And if you are applying the tantrum response to a meltdown, you are not failing your child. You are using the wrong tool for the wrong situation. And today I want to give you the right one. I want to start with the most important distinction I can offer you today, because everything else I am going to teach you in this episode depends on understanding this one thing. A tantrum and a meltdown are not the same neurological event. They look similar. They both involve a child who is dysregulated, distressed, and difficult to reach. But what is happening inside the brain is fundamentally different, and that difference determines everything about how you should respond. A tantrum is goal-directed behavior. When a child is throwing a tantrum, there is a part of their brain that knows what they want, that is trying to obtain it, and that is capable of stopping when the goal is achieved or when the consequence becomes significant enough. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, impulse control, emotional regulation, and decision-making, is still online during a tantrum. It is available, which means that logical consequences, clear limits, and calm explanation can actually reach it. A meltdown is something categorically different. A meltdown is what happens when the nervous system has exceeded its regulatory capacity and the prefrontal cortex has gone completely offline. Not metaphorically offline, neurologically offline. The reasoning brain is no longer available. The decision-making system is no longer accessible. And this means that no consequence, no matter how clear or how consistent, will reach the part of the brain that receives and processes consequences, because that part of the brain has temporarily shut down. You are delivering a logical message to a system that is no longer capable of receiving logical messages. And the result is escalation rather than resolution, every single time. This is the moment I want you to hear clearly, because it changes everything. Your child is not choosing this. They are not manipulating you. They are not doing this on purpose. They are not being defiant. They have reached their neurological limit. Their system has gone into survival mode, and the behavior you are watching is the output of a brain that is doing the only thing it has available to do when the regulatory capacity has been completely exhausted. Understanding this does not mean you abandon your expectations or lower your standards. It means you stop trying to parent during the meltdown and start learning to respond to the nervous system underneath it. Now I want to talk specifically about why neurodivergent children, children with ADHD, sensory processing differences, anxiety and executive functioning challenges, experience meltdowns more frequently, more intensely, and with less apparent provocation than their neurotypical peers. Because one of the most painful things I hear from parents in my practice is the belief that their child is choosing to overreact, that the meltdown over the food touching the other food on the plate is evidence of a character flaw or a parenting failure. It is neither. It is neurology. The ADHD and neurodivergent brain operates with a lower stress threshold than a neurotypical brain. It experiences sensory input more intensely. It processes transitions more slowly and with more neurological cost. It has less reliable access to the emotional regulation tools that neurotypical children develop more naturally and more automatically. And it carries a higher baseline cortisol level from the ongoing effort of navigating a world that was not designed for how it works. A world that requires sustained attention, impulse control, flexible thinking, and rapid transitions, all of which are the precise functions that ADHD most directly impairs. What this means in practical terms is that by the time your neurodivergent child hits the meltdown threshold, they have almost always been managing an enormous amount of neurological load before the visible trigger ever appeared. The food touching the food on the plate was not the problem. It was the thing that finally exceeded a system that had been working very hard all day to hold itself together. The meltdown that looks disproportionate is almost always proportionate to the cumulative weight of everything that came before it. Understanding this shifts the question from why is my child doing this to what has my child's nervous system been carrying today that I did not see. Every meltdown moves through 4 predictable stages. And once you know these stages, you begin to see things you were always missing before. You begin to see the early warning signs that were always there that you were not yet trained to read. And that is where the real power lives, not in responding to the meltdown once it has arrived, but in catching it before it gets there. The first stage is what I call the rumbling stage. This is the early warning period. The child may seem slightly irritable, clingy, or low energy. They may resist small requests more than usual. They may seek more physical contact or more reassurance. This stage is almost universally missed by parents, not because parents are inattentive, but because these signs look exactly like moodiness or a low energy day, rather than a nervous system that is beginning to approach its limit. But this stage is critical because it is the last stage at which the child is still accessible. Intervention here, reducing demands, offering co-regulation, providing sensory support, addressing any halt factors, which I will come back to in a moment, can prevent the meltdown from arriving at all. This is the window. And most parents never know it exists until they learn to look for it. The second stage is the rage stage. This is the peak of the meltdown. The prefrontal cortex is offline. The nervous system is in full survival mode. This is not the time for reasoning, for consequences, for asking the child to use their words, or for any form of verbal instruction. Your only job in this stage is safety and co-regulation. Keep the environment safe. Reduce stimulation wherever possible. Regulate your own nervous system first, because a dysregulated parent cannot co-regulate a dysregulated child. Your calm body is the most powerful intervention available to you in this stage, even when it does not appear to be doing anything. It is doing something neurologically significant even when the behavior has not yet changed. The third stage is the recovery stage. The storm has passed, but the child is not yet okay. They are exhausted. They are often ashamed. Their body has just been through an enormous neurological event, and they need time and quiet presence to return to baseline. This is not the time for the debrief, for the consequence, or for the discussion of what went wrong and what they should have done differently. Those conversations require a prefrontal cortex that is back online and regulated. A child in the recovery stage does not yet have that. What they need in this stage is quiet warmth, presence without pressure. The message that the storm is over and you are still here and nothing has changed between you. The fourth and final stage is what I call the re-entry stage. The child is coming back online. The prefrontal cortex is re-engaging. This is the window for the brief, warm, completely non-shaming acknowledgement of what happened, not a full analysis, not a consequence, but a simple, gentle recognition that something hard happened and you are both okay. And then a return to the normal flow of the day. Not as though nothing happened, but as though what happened has been acknowledged, received, and set down. I want to give you one more tool before I close today's episode, and it is one of the most practically useful frameworks I have ever brought into my clinical work and into my own home. It is called HALT, and it stands for hungry, anxious, lonely, and tired. These four states are the most common contributors to a lowered meltdown threshold in neurodivergent children, and the critical thing to understand about them is that the ADHD brain is often remarkably poor at noticing them internally before they are already affecting everything externally. A neurotypical child who is hungry usually feels hungry and can identify that feeling and communicate it. An ADHD child who is hungry may have no conscious awareness of the hunger until their blood sugar is low enough that everything is suddenly harder, more frustrating, more overwhelming, and more likely to tip into dysregulation. The same is true for anxiety, for loneliness, and for tiredness. The ADHD brain's ability to notice its own internal states, which is called interoception, is frequently impaired, which means that by the time the ADHD child shows outward signs of being hungry, anxious, lonely, or tired, they are often already significantly affected by that state. What HALT gives you is a daily diagnostic practice. Before the difficult part of the day arrives, before homework, before transitions, before social demands, you take 30 seconds and ask yourself which of these four states might be active in your child right now. And then you address it before it becomes a problem. A protein snack before homework. A brief connection moment before a transition. A check-in before the social situation. An earlier bedtime when the week has been heavy. None of these prevent every meltdown. But they prevent the ones that were always preventable, the ones that were never really about the trigger at all, but about a system that was already running on empty before the trigger ever arrived. I want to close today by telling you something I genuinely believe, because I have seen it in my clinical work and I have lived it in my own family. The parent who understands what is happening beneath the behavior is the parent who can respond instead of react. And that difference, in the middle of a meltdown, in the middle of a hard season, in the middle of a year that has asked more of your family than you expected, that difference is everything. It changes the relationship. It changes the child's experience of themselves, and it changes your experience of yourself as a parent, which matters more than most people ever acknowledge. I put everything I taught you today into a guide called the Meltdown Map. It covers all 4 stages in full clinical detail, gives you the complete 5-step response protocol you can use in real time, explains co-regulation by age from toddler through young adult, and includes the HALT daily check-in, printable, so you can start using this framework with your family tonight. It is $37 and it downloads instantly. The link is in the show notes. If you are in the middle of this with your child right now, and I know some of you are, this is the guide I wish every parent had before the next meltdown hit. And if today's episode helped you, I would love for you to share it with one parent who needed to hear it. Leave a review if you have a moment. It helps more families find this podcast and find these frameworks when they need them most. I will be back next week with another episode. Until then, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember peace is possible and you do not have to do this alone.